That is a tasty plasma. Maybe I could sneak in and watch Final Fantasy Spirits Within. I don't care what anybody says, that's one of the best sci-fi films ever made.
I will be the judge of that, Little Miss Life is Strange. Before I start reviewing this film, I'd like to talk briefly about an original world that I've been building for the past few months for the purpose of fantasy roleplays. The world I'm working on is one where Earth is brought to the brink by a horde of mysterious entities that are highly aggressive and completely immune to physical attacks. With the remnants of humanity being forced to thrive inside of fortified constructs, their only hope of fighting back is by harnessing the powers of the very beings they are hiding from. And the first campaign I plan to run in this world would follow the escapades of a scientist who wants to further study said monsters with the backing of a small military squad. I created this world to essentially avoid accusations of plagiarism or uncreativity when I get round to publishing said roleplay sessions online. And you all know where I'm going with this, right? This infamous box office bomb, which bears the name Final Fantasy despite lacking almost any ties to its source material, a film which I have never seen before, is about 90% similar to my original idea. And I hate that. This is my way of putting it out there that my pending series, New Millennium, is in no way based on Final Fantasy The Spirits Within, because in my series, the corruptive space phantoms are instead shadow creatures empowered by the sun. And humanity wields their powers in the form of specialized magical abilities instead of just cramming spiritual essences into guns. Which, now I think about it, makes my idea more like the original Final Fantasy games than Spirits Within. Okay, well, that is fully off my chest now, so we can start. What a way to begin. Spirits Within is infamous for a number of reasons. Adjusting for inflation, it is the 16th biggest box office bomb of all time. And while being 16th might not sound so bad, I think it'll hit home harder if I ask you to imagine losing $94 million. Unless you're like Jeff Bezos or something. And if you are, please stop watching my video and go solve world hunger, you money-hoarding ghoul. Anyways, what makes this film stand out over fellow disasters such as John Carter, Pluto Nash, or Mulan is that it tried and failed to innovate cinema as a medium by introducing the concept of a virtual actor, a character model who could appear in different roles in different CGI films. This didn't catch on. Although, I will admit that for a film released in 2001, Spirits Within looks okay. Super bland in terms of its visual design, don't get me wrong, but its character models could be plopped into an average video game 20 years later and not look horribly out of place. Getting into the story, which I've already glanced upon, we meet Aki, a scientist who is infected by one of the alien phantoms and is haunted by dreams of robot wars. Trudging around the ruins of Old New York, which is a wild thing to call it, she finds a surviving plant, the 6th of 8 unique spirits, which when collected together can be used to neutralize the phantoms without harming the Earth.
Spirits I thought we weren't supposed to use the S word.
Don't get smart with me. Now let's see if that plant does the trick.
Oh, and her mentor's name is Dr. Sid, albeit with an S. This is the only Final Fantasy adjacent thing in the whole movie, and they didn't even spell it right. Standing in opposition to Aki and Sid is General Hein, played by James Woods, a sneering asshole with a shitty attitude who doesn't care for what he ignorantly considers to be progressive hippie bullshit. Just like the character he plays in this film.
Gathering plants and animals from around the world to fight the phantoms is utter nonsense.
He wants to blow up the alien ghosts with a big gun, which Aki and Sid naturally object to, given how damaging that could be. And angered by this setback, he orders his men to monitor Aki and arrest her if she exhibits any erratic behaviour, baselessly claiming that she could be a pawn of the phantom infecting her.
Major, send some of our men to keep an eye on the good captain.
Heading out into the wasteland with an entourage of soldiers, one of whom seems to be her ex-boyfriend, Alec Baldwin, Aki makes tracks for the 7th necessary spirits, which turns out to be infused within the backpack of a dead soldier. Like, the backpack itself is infused with this spirit, so this film has a strange interpretation of what a spirit is. That said, this acquisition does cost one guy his soul. These big snake-like phantoms are apparently attracted by Aki's infection, which causes her to collapse. And even worse, this prompts one of Hein's men to turn on everyone else. Through a little bit of light soul bondage with her ex, Aki is able to recuperate back at home base. However, Hein takes this opportunity to have both Aki and the captain arrested, impeding their quest for the final spirit and ensuring that he gets to do things his way. Props to James Woods once again for method acting as a smug, angry, hate-filled shithead. Someone should tell him he can stop now. Taking matters into his own hands, Hein decides to lower the phantom-resistant barrier, only for his men to get chomped by a horde of phantoms. Who'da thunk it?
What have I done?
The phantoms then infiltrate and begin destroying New York, munching on the delicious souls of all of the humans present. And realizing that he's fucked up royally, Hein gets into an escape ship and fucks off. And so, our main gang bust out of prison, ride around in a buggy, and dodge a bunch of hungry phantoms. So far, this is more like Pac-Man than it is Final Fantasy.
You think this 8 spirit stuff is really gonna work against the phantoms? I mean, what if it's all a bunch of mumbo-jumbo? Ow! Jeez. Jane, do you mind if we stop talking? I'm trying to concentrate here.
At this point, Steve Buscemi, playing the comic relief character in this otherwise very somber film, gets eaten while trying to secure an escape ship. Then Roz from Frasier gets ganked, and last of all, Ving Rhames sacrifices himself in order to help defeat a boss phantom. And with the 3 most high-energy party members wiped, the latter half of this film becomes something of a slog.
I wish I could believe they're in a better place.
Sid confirms that the 8th and final spirit is within the impact crater at the Caspian Mountains. Which is unfortunate considering that Hein is about to blow said location up with his big fucking gun. And worse, his big gun brings forth a spaghetti nightmare, which only gets stronger with each subsequent shot. Oh my god. If there's one thing I love about this film, it's the zero gravity scenes. They are always incredibly funny to look at. At the 11th hour, Aki is bestowed with the final spirit, giving her insight into, well, what this film could have looked like if it wasn't constantly washed out with yawn-inducing browns and greys. And in the end, Hein overloads his big gun in a fit of impotent rage, blowing himself up. Moreover, Alec Baldwin sacrifices himself, because everyone in this film sacrifices themselves, to banish the alien ghosts, leaving Aki with the dead body of her rekindled lover. Not the happiest ending, but probably the best you're going to get in a world as bleak as this one. I may have fallen into the trap of every internet reviewer where I ended up synopsizing the plot of this film without giving too much of my personal inputs, but that is really hard to do for this film, because when you divorce it from the Final Fantasy name and try to enjoy it as its own thing, it's just painfully okay. While it does drag on a bit, it doesn't suck horribly, nor was it the revolutionary 3D experience it was trying to be. The only part of this film that actually emotionally struck a chord with me is when Aki talked about the spirit she acquired from a dying young girl. A moment that is heart-wrenching, but so minor to the overall story that it didn't warrant me mentioning it earlier.
She told me that she was ready to die.
As for this film's legacy, well, it sank Square Pictures as a company. It almost cost Square its merger with Enix, meaning we very well could have missed out on having Square Enix, and it often appears on worst adaptations lists for any media. But if you're a fan of the visual design of Mass Effect, you actually owe Spirits Within some props, as it was cited as a major source of inspiration by the series' art director. Yeah, that's reaching, I know, but at the end of the day, Spirits Within is just an early 2000s sci-fi film with an overinflated animation budget. One which slowly hemorrhaged all of its interesting side characters during its 90-minute runtime. So, with that in mind, I give this movie a 6 out of 10. It looks and sounds alright. The story is a bit too slow and could have done with some hard editing, even if it was animated. And the main character is about as exciting as lightly buttered bread. Also, the film's setting inadvertently stole my idea 20 years before I had it. 4 out of 10. Okay, DVD extras. 5 out of 10. Cheers for watching. I may be cutting it a little bit fine, but I'm still gonna try to complete one more Final Fantasy video before September rolls around. Huge thank you to my patrons, especially Anonymous, Dan Brown, Fitzwilliam Ramsbottom, Pixel Pusher, Romeo, Shameboy, Thomas Walker, and Tomb Pirates.
Final Fantasy Spirits Within. I don't care what anybody says, that's a sci-fi film